Started. Hi everybody, my name is Mariah Wyka and I am an outreach coordinator for the Associated Colleges of the Midwest and our off-campus study programs. And today we're really excited to have you here for an informational webinar on the London and Florence Arts and Context program. We're really excited to have Dr. Nancy Berry from Luther College with us today. Dr. Berry will be the visiting faculty director for the spring 2017 London and Florence program, but particularly for the Florence section, which is where she will be teaching and guiding a group of students. And so we are really fortunate to have Dr. Nancy Berry with us today to tell us a little bit more about London and that portion of the experience. And one thing that I just wanted to add is that we'll have Dr. Berry speak for about 25 minutes, and then you all will have an opportunity to ask questions about what Dr. Berry has talked about, but also about the Florence portion, in which case I will be thrilled to answer any questions you may have about the Florence portion of the London and Florence program. And so, if you do have questions that come up throughout the presentation, feel free to put them into your question pane, and we will be happy to address them at the end of Dr. Berry's presentation. With that, Nancy, would you like to introduce yourself, and then we can launch into talking a little bit more about London.
Hello, everyone. As Mariah said, my name's Nancy Berry. I'm thrilled to be meeting you in cyberspace, but I'm more thrilled that in a few months I will be actually leading students in the London portion of the London and Florence Arts and Context semester. So what do you need to know about me before I launch into this presentation? Here's a few things. I have been teaching at Luther College for 26 years, and I have been to London not every year of those 26 years. I've been to London approximately 10 times in those 26 years, most frequently because I teach a course in theater and society in what Luther College has as its January term. So I'm quite excited to be with the ACM semester because we get to have 7 weeks. We have double the amount of time in which I had been sort of squeezing play going so almost every night of the week for 3 weeks. So we won't be going to the theater every night, but we will be going every week, and I'll talk a little bit more today about what that means. So that's who I am, and you need to know also that I love London. There is a part of me that feels at home in it. It exhausts me. There's a famous quote about London by Samuel Johnson, who said, "He who is tired of London is tired of life," and I fully believe that. I think that it's a city that makes me feel more than anything else alive, and theater is part of that. And if you're wondering, well, what is theater? Theater is the opposite of what I'm doing now. Right now I am sitting in front of a computer screen, and I'm talking to all of you, and you're listening to me, and I have no idea what you're doing. I have no idea if you're eating lunch, if you're talking on your other phone with someone else, because I can't see you. I don't know how you're reacting. And theater is not that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just show you my screen. We're going to move to a PowerPoint in which I talk through what it means to be in London for 7 weeks, and encourage any questions. If you have any question, sort of type it in. Mariah will keep track of it, and I'll try and give you an overview of the kinds of things we'll be doing in London. As Mariah said, I'll talk for about 20-some minutes here, and then we'll open it up for questions, and then she will introduce a bit more about Florence. So I just realized that my PowerPoint, here we go. So what does it mean to go to London? Well, of course, we would start one way or another at one of the earliest incarnations of theater in Europe and in London, which was the Globe Theater. And what you're seeing now is a picture of the Globe reconstruction. So the Globe reconstruction happened because an American by the name of Sam Wanamaker went to London and convinced the Houses of Parliament, as well as all of the London theater crew and crowds, that they were missing an opportunity to recreate Shakespeare on the stage the way it was in the 16th century. And because of his efforts, we have now a magnificent, live, living Globe Theater. And the thing I want to say about this, as you can see, These people are called groundlings. They're the people who pay money, the smallest amount of money, to stand at and watch the actors. And I will tell you that the first time I went to the Globe, I saw a production of The Tempest. It was one of the 5 top things I've ever done in my life, was to go to the Globe Theater in person. And I was sitting about here through the first act because I had a ticket to get me a seat. And I could not resist for the whole second act of the play joining the groundlings. And I will tell you that as the play moved forward, I kept inching closer and closer to the stage. This is my favorite audience member right here, who's literally leaning on the stage. And the players, of course, understand this. The Globe was designed to be a theater house in which players and actors could at every moment absolutely observe what was going on within any audience member who was watching the play. They could see if they were falling asleep, they could see if they were drinking beer, they could see if they were doing an untoward thing with a partner they had brought to the theater. They could see all of this, and the reason that they could is the plays were performed in daylight. This is an open-air theater. And in fact, the reconstruction of the Globe exists to have an authentic thatch roof. That's one of the reasons the original Globe Theater, which here we have in illustrations from the 16th century, the reason that it burned is because, in fact, the Elizabethans were crazy about props. They loved props. And they used a firework display in the middle of one of the productions, and needless to say, it caught the thatch roof on fire, and that was the end of it. So the theater has always existed in London on the banks of the Thames, and it exists now in that same location on the south bank of the Thames. And sorry, just bear with me here. The reconstruction of the theater exists. This is a sort of complicated picture, but you can see that it shows us what is most important is to have a stage that thrusts. We call this a thrust stage. It comes out into the audience. The pit is where the groundlings stand. We've got behind the stage. If you come to London this coming spring, we'll go on a tour of the Globe, and you will all have an opportunity to actually stand behind this door and make your entrance onto the Globe Theater. It's a terrific workshop. It's led by a member of the Globe Royal Shakespeare Acting Company. And they'll talk about what it means to sort of walk from the backstage, in which you had all of the stuff that we think of as modern theater stuff, backstage. But you also have a trap door that goes down to the bottom. You have the upper stage, a balcony. Romeo and Juliet's famous balcony scene was performed right here. And then you also had this bit called the heavens. And so it's very important, if you can see it over here, these illustrations, it's been recreated to actually show what the paintings were. But most importantly, the thing I want to stress here is theater is about community. Theater is live actors performing real texts, real music, real dances in front of living people. And it is impossible, really, to replicate what theater means, because what theater means is what happens in this space when people attend in public, watching one another, watching the actors do their things. So that's a little bit about the Globe Theater, which will be one of the hallmarks of what we do. I've got a picture here. The Globe Theater, when it was reconstructed and built, opened years ago now. The Globe Company realized, well, we have great theater audiences from April until October, but it's closed in winter because it is an open-air theater and there is no heat. And so they decided to construct an indoor theater. This picture doesn't do it justice. It's actually called the Sam Wanamaker Theater. And it too is designed to be a historic replica of what a 17th century Jacobean, that stands for the reign of the Jacobites, and it stands as an entirely lit by candlelight theater. And if you'll notice here, it's the same construction as the Globe. It's a thrust stage. The audience sits all around it, but it is quite remarkable because the thing is only lit by candles. And so you don't have the tremendous sight lines of the audience that you have outdoors in the Globe, but you are absolutely aware of the hundreds of people who are watching this theater production with you. So here's a play that's going to be at the Wanamaker February through April. It's Othello. It's a very fetching design for the brochure, I think. I'm not certain whether I haven't purchased those tickets yet, but it will be one of the plays that I hope we'll be able to see. So you might be saying, okay, so yes, of course, Shakespeare, 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 yada, yada, yada. Theater is about Shakespeare. We go to London. That's true, and I won't deny it, and I will tell you that I have seen some of the best productions of any Shakespeare plays that I've seen in my entire life, brought to us by the Royal Shakespeare Company. But I'm showing you this on the screen right now because I want you to understand this. This is a map of all of the different theaters that exist in London. So as you can see, there's some in particular areas and neighborhoods. One of the biggest ones is this Barbican Arts Center. Another one, of course, the major ones are all in this area near Leicester Square. We actually call this Theater Land. All of these theaters, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you've got all of these sort of theaters within almost a 4 or 5 block radius that's sort of created by Shaftesbury Avenue here and Charing Cross Road here, Piccadilly Circus and Leicester Square. I'm sure most of you understand. I'll talk a little bit about the tube, but this universal symbol right here, a yellow circle with a blue line through it, that means that's where the tube stops. And so even though London is a vast city, it's a city that is mammoth in proportion and scale, it is a transportable city. I cannot stress enough, the greatest joy I have as someone who loves cities is that when I go to London, I don't even want to drive, I don't need to drive, I can get anywhere I need to go by virtue of the tube, by virtue of a bus, and also just by virtue of my own 2 feet. So all of these numbers here that you're seeing through 52, 54, we're up to 62, all of these theaters are actual places, and some of them are small houses. That, when I say small, I mean the theater holds perhaps only 100 to 150 people, and some of them are vast. Some of these West End playhouses, Haymarket Theater, for example, the Royal Haymarket Theater, holds 2,000 people. So part of the joy of going to a course in which you can attend the theater every week, a couple of times every week, is for us to see the range of the kinds of performances that can be done in different kinds of spaces. So one of the goals of the course is to introduce us to the living art of what makes theater theater, but it's also the goal of understanding how the place where theater is performed creates a sense within the audience of what might happen and how they might feel about it. And it's not a mediated experience. This is the great joy of it. It's not mediated. It's not a film. It's not a webcam. It's live people doing their lines, not doing their lines, listening to the audience. Listening to the audience. You have no idea how difficult it is for me right now, staring at this computer screen, to have any idea of the 50 who are attentive right now. That's what my dashboard is telling me. There's 50, 25% within a split second. 25% of the people watching this webinar said, not so much, stop talking. And I myself have no idea what it is that's making that happen. But if you're an actor and you're in a playhouse in London, you can tell within a split second who's fallen asleep, who's left the energy of the play. And I can tell you, as somebody who's seen hundreds of plays in all of these different playhouses, you as an audience member can feel it too. You can tell when an audience goes to sleep. You can tell what the actors are doing to kind of bring them back. And it's the great energy of the work. It really is. Okay, so in addition to the sort of globe that we think of as the Shakespeare Theatre, the other reason that London is such a magnificent setting for theater is they have this organization, and it The other theater inside the National, up on the second level, is what's called the Littleton. It probably seems like the most traditional theater some of you have encountered, which is to say there's a stage and there's a very clear line between the stage and the audience. And then the third theater that the organization has is this theater called here, it's known now as the Dorfman Theater. And so this is what used to be a very small black box theater. Those of you who understand that terminology, a black box theater is when the stage is reconfigured for every production. Essentially, it's a room, right, and the actors and the directors are free to assemble and congregate both setting and audience. And the Dorfman Theater inside the National Theater has that same capacity. So I don't know how many plays we'll see at the National Theater, but it will be one of our stops. It's a great place. There's live music before performances. They have 3 different eating establishments. I've seen people arrive for a theater play as early as 4:30 in the afternoon. They have tea, then they sit, they listen to music, they go to art galleries that are contained in the levels of this theater, and then at 8 o'clock or 7:30 they actually go in and watch a play. So here's another reason to go to London. London is filled with living art, dead art in a manner of speaking, and also evolving art. So this is one of my favorite pictures of London. This is looking across the Thames from the viewpoint of someone who is standing on Millennium Bridge. And those of you who know Harry Potter movies will recognize this bridge. This bridge was opened in the Millennium year. But what we're looking at here is what's called the New Tate. This is the New Tate. The reason it's called the New Tate is because one of the most famous 19th century art galleries in London is called the Tate. So now it's known as the Old Tate. And what's interesting about the New Tate is, first of all, it's a reconstructed power plant. As you can see, the scale here is enormous, and it looks like a big industrial building. And several years ago, many years ago, London art societies and organizers said, what we're going to do with this space that is no longer needed as an industrial kind of power plant is we're going to turn it into a museum on contemporary art. And it has one of the best collections in the world of 20th century modern, postmodern art, sculpture, video, paintings. It's a terrific collection, and they also, of course, have guest exhibits. And if you wanted to, in one day, you could go into the New Tate and you could see everything that's new in the art world in whatever medium you want. And you could get on a boat here on the bank of the Thames and you could float your way to the Old Tate. And then you could see in that museum all of the masters of British painting, Turner, and others, and you could see what we call traditional portraiture that's been done, and the great collection of the surrealist paintings and the 19th century paintings that Picasso, a little bit of early Picasso, that sort of led to all the things that are collected here in the New Tate. So London is a city, and this certainly connects with those of you who, when you go to Florence, will be surrounded by art in many different configurations and settings, and your study in London will continue that without question. Everywhere you turn in London, there's art, history, and music, and they're waiting for you. You can just, there's you can get to within a tube ride. You can get to 62 different museums. And of course, one of the ones that we'll get to, because our classroom will be very closely connected to it, is the British Museum. This is one of the great museums in the world. It's the site of a current tug of war between one of its greatest collections, which are called the Elgin Marbles. This was based on a architectural dig that Lord Elgin did to bring back to London actual friezes and decorative work from the Parthenon building in Greece. So as you can imagine, in the 21st century, citizens of Greece would perhaps like to have that material back. But the British Museum represented sort of the way in which the culture that went to these other places and took what it wanted from other places and put them in a museum where millions of people could see them. The Rosetta Stone lives inside the British Museum. There's, again, terrific museums. Here's another picture of the great reading room in the British Museum. And this is sort of the middle, literally the middle lobby of the British Museum. Has this absolutely sort of modern, almost postmodern configuration, because the British Museum used to be divided by a huge courtyard. And so literally you'd have to go out of one of the buildings in order to get your way into the other one. And they said, well, that's really a little, we have so many things that people want to stay inside, and it's confusing depending on which one they enter. So they said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to actually put the old reading room inside this newly constructed lobby. We're going to cover the whole thing, and we're going to allow people to go into this small collection which houses first editions of many books by great British authors. You can not read them you know, with a bag of popcorn in your hand, of course, but you can certainly look at them and see them. And then after that, you can walk out of that room, you can walk down these steps, and within 5 minutes, you're staring at the Rosetta Stone. So this is another reason that London provides us with opportunities that really are unmatched anywhere else we go. Now, the other course that students take when they go to London is a course called London City as Text, and this is taught by my colleague Andrew Kennedy, and he's done the course for many years with ACM. He's a terrific teacher. I've heard him lecture. I followed him on a workshop that I attended with other ACM faculty, and I followed him around for a day in Victorian London, or actually the part of London that's dedicated to both Victoria and Albert. The V&A Museum is the place. But the most interesting thing that I wanted to do with him is one of the things he'll do with students, which is to take students to the Houses of Parliament. This is a kind of antiquated picture of what it used to look like. You'll go to the Houses of Parliament and you'll actually meet a member of Parliament and sort of learn about the history of the city in ways that allow you to sort of see its living culture. So, as I said, it's a modern city, it's a postmodern city, it's a global city, but it has within it centuries-old buildings that make available the historical context in which this 21st century economy and political union and cultural phenomenon has existed. So that's in my mind why it is that you should always be going to London. I just realized I was listening to myself talk, and I thought, oh, it's sounding a little bit more like a pep talk, but I am enthusiastic about it. Now, if you don't want to go to the British Museum, you don't want to go to Houses of Parliament, this is an example of what we call the low-key museums that exist on every other street in London. This is a famous one, the Sherlock Holmes Museum. I went there for the first time in 1995, and I could have stayed in this room, which is, of course, the library, for probably an hour and a half. It's made up with all the artifacts that Conan Doyle would have sort of used to recreate this fictional character for us. But it's an example of sort of what is waiting just around the corner. And the key thing about London is to not sort of be totally subsumed by what we call the major attractions, but also the smaller ones. So one of the ways you get this sense of history and culture is through the churches of London. So here's an example of the other view from Millennium Bridge. So there's Millennium Bridge. It's a walking bridge. It's one of the great ways of crossing the Thames. And this is St. Paul's Cathedral. And on the other end of this picture, you can't see it here, is the New Tate. So this is one of my favorite vantage points in London, to just walk onto the Millennium Bridge, stand right in the middle, and decide whether or not I want to do old school, old church, St. Paul's, and go and listen to matins or evensong or whatever it might be happening, or I want to walk across the bridge this way and see the most raucous new sculptures by postmodern artists. So that's kind of an example of what's available to you. I'm at the 26-minute mark, so Mariah, I'm going to close it up here in just a few minutes. London is a city that is easy to navigate, but you do need a decent map. I understand this is the 21st century, everybody uses their cell phones for this, for that, for everything, but I would encourage anybody who's thinking about going to London to invest one way or another in an actual paper map that will live inside your backpack. And so here, Bloomsbury is the area where the British Museum is that I talked about, and this is Sherlock Holmes Museum I just saw. The other thing that makes London so terrific, is of course its magnificent parks. And so these are also part of what should be everybody's day. And my idea of an ideal day in London is good conversation, kind of a class in which people are talking about something that they've done together, like go to the theater. You do that, you have conversation, then you go and you take your lunch outdoors, probably as early as March. You could sit outside in Hyde Park. You could certainly listen to Speaker's Corner here if you wanted to see whoever it is wanted to take the podium for the day. So you'd walk outdoors, you would sort of give yourself some fresh air. If you had an inkling, you could perhaps go to a museum one way or another, or our own flats are over in Maida Vale, which are right up here on this map. And then of course you'd come back into the city proper, which is involved right here. This is what we call the theater area. I think I have maybe, oh, and of course this, the Tube. How could I finish talking about London without mentioning the Tube? So this is what makes it all possible. What makes it possible is an underground system by which people, millions of people every day are in fact transporting themselves throughout the city. So again, Maida Vale, this is the stop, and this is on what's called the Bakerloo line. So this is where the flats are for students in ACM, and it's about a 25 to 35 minute train tube ride. One of the things ACM will do is of course provide you with a tube pass so that you'll be able to go within these zones by virtue of your card. It's a transport card. Those of you who live in Chicago, it works the same way the L card works. And here again, Russell Square, this is kind of an area close to the British Museum and where our classrooms will be. You could get off here at King's Cross St. Pancras. And so this is sort of one tube ride to do it. But the key thing is, if you learn how to navigate this system, you can travel anywhere in the world with success. And the other thing I love to do in London is take walks. This is my favorite kind of venture. They're called London Walks. They cost £10. I've done several of them over the course of my many years going to London. They're terrific. The guides are fabulous people. They know everything there is to know about the walk. And you meet at a tube stop at an appointed time. And students, actually it'll be £8, and you can sort of find different areas of the city. So even though it's a massive transport city, it's a walking friendly city. I know that seems paradoxical and counterintuitive, but, and of course at the very end of the day, this is what everybody wants to do. They want to go to the nearby pub, and they want to have a decent pub meal, which this is sort of, a pint of whatever it is that suits you, as well as a bit of shepherd's pie. And these are called chips in London, and these are called mushy peas. So that's sort of what you need to kind of think about as you're moving through the London landscape. Pubs are called that because they were public houses. And I will say I have lived in the United States for many years, and I have yet to find what I would call an authentic pub in the United States. It's a culture of place. It's an attitude about socializing. There's a sense when you go into a pub that you are there to have conversation and to meet people and to talk. It is not necessarily a place where there's a million TV screens kind of showing you what the nearest soccer match is, although there are pubs like that. Those of you who are what we would now call football fans. And so now I'm going to stop. I think I've even extended my time a little bit, and I'm going to take questions. This is a photo of I think one of the more recent ACM groups, obviously in Tower Bridge. By the time we get there, Tower Bridge will be open to traffic. I just learned that it's not open to traffic right now. It's under repair. But Tower Bridge, which is a neighborhood all of its own, will be open, I think, by the end of this year. So Mariah, I am going to end the PowerPoint. Am I back on camera? Am I on screen?
You are. I think we both are. So
great.
Fantastic.
Okay. 31 minutes. I went a little long. I hope that's okay.
No problem. So thank you so much. I know that I learned a lot during that time. So thanks for sharing your knowledge of London with us, Nancy. And at this point, we have one question to kick us off, and I just want to add to the audience, to whoever is with us right now, that Nancy can speak to, any future students for the spring who are with us right now. She can speak to specific things about that semester, but also if you have programs or questions about the program in general. We both have knowledge about, Nancy knows a lot about the London portion, and I know a lot about the Florence portion. So we're happy to answer general questions as well. It looks like one of our first questions is a specific question about next spring, and it's what are some specific plays we'll be seeing in the spring that you're excited about?
Yes, that's a great question. And because we're still waiting on the final number of students who will be in the semester, I will tell you I haven't actually purchased all the tickets yet, but I have been scouting plays, and I'm definitely interested, if we can, to see the play Othello. We will also go to Stratford. I was just looking at what the Royal Shakespeare Company is doing in Stratford. We go to Stratford for an overnight. And one of the plays that we'll see there is Julius Caesar. I need to bring up my previous screen from the National Theater. There's a couple of dramas there. So I'm sorry I don't have the roster with me. I should have brought it, of things that I'm considering. But I will send out an email. Here's what I can do. I'll send out an email and get a sense from students about interest and experience in kinds of plays. The course is designed to help students see a range of plays. So it's not all Shakespeare. There will be contemporary drama. I'm sure there will be one, what I call Big Bang musical, that we will attend. And so I think the key thing to know is, and as I purchase tickets, I will be letting students know that these are the plays that are on the roster. The first 7 weeks are going to see a completely different roster of plays than the second 7 weeks. And many of the playhouses have not even said what their, what their roster is going to be, what's on as early as March and April. So to be determined is the answer to the question. And as it gets filled out, I'll let you know more.
Fantastic. Okay, we have another question. Are there any field trips outside of London?
Yes, the main one is a trip to Stratford, which is a lovely town. It's a market town and a river town. Takes us by train about an hour and a half to get from London. That's the main field trip that we will do as a class. There are a number of day trips that you can make. I think Andrew Kennedy one year had students meet and do the class session in Greenwich, which is a terrific location in which you'll understand and learn about Greenwich Mean Time, if that concept is of interest to you. The other day trips that students can schedule on their own, they can attend, they can go to Oxford, they can go to Cambridge, they can even go to Bath. These are all places that students can travel to on the weekends with easy transport, and we don't have them scheduled as a group necessarily, but I've traveled a bit in those towns, and I'm certainly happy to help students who want to take a weekend to travel outside of London. The rail system in the United Kingdom is quite good, and you can kind of journey easily by train to lots of different parts. One of the cities I recommend students go to if they can is York. I've had some. York is a lovely city. In many ways, it's a walled city. The walls and, if you will, the bars, they're called bars or gates, are still extant in York. So I would be recommending day trips for people, and there certainly is a time. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for students to make those trips.
Great, thank you. I have a question that says, if I'm not a theater major, how should I prepare for the semester?
Great question. I would say two things. First of all, I probably did not do justice to the text, the course that Andrew Kennedy teaches called City as Text. I think that that's a course which is about the history at particular moments. Andrew Kennedy is a cultural historian, and he comes at these artifacts of London, the places, the museums, the artifacts, in terms of how they demonstrate particular moments in time, but also the way they live on in the contemporary moment of the city. So, first thing I want to say is you don't have to be a sort of theater geek to enjoy this course. But your question was, how can I prepare? Well, I think the main thing that I would ask for students to do is to understand that we will be doing theater. That's a reality. And the best thing you can do in the next 2 months is go to a live production somewhere, somehow. And it doesn't matter whether it's a live production at your college. It doesn't matter whether it's at the Goodman Theater in Chicago. The scale is not what is so important. What's so important is you're just getting the feel of what it means to be an audience member and to be open to that experience and to understand that it's way more complicated than the most common way most of us perceive things on, in sort of the 21st century, which is film. So I think there is a kind of unlearning of what it is to be an audience member if we've spent all of our lives sitting in movie theaters watching film. I think stage productions require a whole different part of our mind, and the point of the course is to help us understand what that's about. So I'm not expecting expertise and I'm not expecting fluency, but I am hoping that students have a kind of openness to this.
Awesome. It looks like that is the majority of our questions for now. I think we've covered them. A couple of them were similar. We had a couple people asking about, whether this was still a good fit if you're not a theater major, and I think the answer to that is yes, it absolutely can be. And yeah.
Can I say one thing? I say one thing. The other, I probably didn't do justice to one of the most living cultural art forms in London, which is music. When I was in London this past year, it was the sad occasion of David Bowie's death. And the only good thing about that is that I happened to be in London when it happened, and it made me aware in 15 ways through Sunday how much rock and roll music, contemporary music, lives and is part of the lifeblood of Londoners. And so, I've talked about sort of museums, I've talked about theater, I've talked about Parliament. If you are a person who loves live music and who really wants to learn about the history of rock and roll, you can go have your picture taken on the Abbey Road street. You can do lots of other things about sort of the pop music tradition. In the British Library, one of their standing exhibits is an actual audio exhibit in which the #1 songs from the 1960s, every month in the Billboard charts, you could listen to every song that was #1 on the Billboard chart and just click on them one after another and have a history of the 1960s and 70s in pop music and rock and roll. So the other thing I would say to students who are trying to sort of figure out, well, why would I go to London, is pop music, all its forms and the evolution from the 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s, that will come alive to you when you live in London for 7 weeks.
Awesome. Here's another question that popped up. I know that you alluded to this a bit, but one of our audience members would like to know, has asked you to describe your ideal day in London.
Oh, gosh. It's a full English breakfast is how it begins, and a full English breakfast has two things that American breakfasts usually don't. One is tomatoes, stewed tomatoes of one kind or another, and also baked beans. You got to have the full English breakfast with some sausages and some toast and some tomatoes, eggs one way or another. And then you look at a map of London, and you look at the London Times or the Guardian or whatever newspaper you've got at your hand, and you're saying to yourself, okay, what am I going to do for 2 hours this afternoon that I could do in no other place in the world? And so I go to breakfast, and I have class, so we kind of connect with people that we know. So the class thing is kind of important because I really believe in the power of conversation and shared connections when people travel. There really is a thing about a group, and the reason that you're in a group is partly because it's more fun to compare reactions, and they will be all over the map depending on who's in the class. So we do some community work where we talk through a play we saw last night, or we talk through the class tour, the walking tour that we took yesterday with Andrew Kennedy. So there's talk time with a group of people, and then you've got this map and you've decided, well, today this is what I'm going to do in London town. And you go to this place, it's a museum, it's an exhibit, it's whatever you want, and then you have tea. You have afternoon tea where you sit at a nice coffee shop somewhere. Starbucks are ubiquitous in London as they are all over the world, but you can find much quieter tea houses. You sit and you have a cup of tea and you settle yourself. And depending on if it's a theater night, you may want to go back, you may want to take a nap, you may want to sort of have a light supper with your friends, and then you go to the theater and you end the night seeing an absolutely riveting drama performed by the best actors in the world, and then you leave the theater and maybe you go out for a pint after it's over and you talk about it with your friends, and then you try and get a good night's sleep because the next day in London is going to be just like that.
Nancy, you're making me want to get on a plane right now. Fantastic. Well, I think that answers our questions about the London portion, and I just want to add, in addition to that, of course the other element of this program is the other half of it is in Florence, which is an incredibly fabulous, very different city from London.
I think I have a picture. Mariah, I think I have, oh, nope, sorry, I changed my screen there, but I put up a picture from the Florence thing. Here we go, there's Florence. There you are. Should I take my camera off? I'm going to take my camera off.
Well, that's just fine.
Okay. I'm hanging out. I'm listening.
Sounds good.
I'll take my camera off.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. So I would just add that, I've spent some time in Florence, and it is one of the most artistic, beautiful places you will ever spend time in. Just to walk through the streets of Florence is to be in a living and breathing museum. And to be able to contrast that with the experiences you'll have in London is such a rare opportunity. One fun part about living in Florence is that you'll live with a host family, which gives you a truly authentic Italian living experience. But then you'll have also had half of a semester to live in a flat in London and to take the tube and transport here and there and know what it's like to be living independently in a huge urban center. So for those of you that joined us today, we are really excited to talk to you more about the London and Florence program in general. You can always reach out to me. I am a campus outreach coordinator and thrilled to answer your questions about the London and Florence program, the Florence program alone, or any other ACM off-campus study programs. And so with that, I would just say that, whether you're a colleague who joined us to, one of the faculty members from the ACM to learn a little bit more about the program, or a student who's going with Nancy to London in the spring, or a prospective student who's trying to figure out whether this is the right program for them. We hope that you learned something today. I know that I did, and we're really looking forward to being in touch with you in the future. I'll send a follow-up email to any of you who joined us on the webinar today, and please send any questions my way, and we're really looking forward to talking to you about London and Florence in the future. So Nancy, with that.
Well, yeah, can I add one thing, Mariah? So I would just add that, first of all, please, I'm assuming ACM will get questions and will forward them to me.
We sure
So, I can see that there were a total of 14 questions, so there were several people who kind of had some questions that Mariah was kind of curating there and combining if they were similar, which makes sense. But I, absolutely, in the space of an email can maybe be more nuanced and specific, and as I said, as soon as I start booking tickets for this play, I will be notifying members of the class about, what we're seeing, so you have a rough sense of that. But the other thing I wanted to say is I do get quite excited. London brings out the sort of perpetual traveler in me. But one of the things I wanted to show, I didn't have time to bring it up here, was one of my favorite books about London is a book called Quiet London. And it will be definitely one of the things I pack, because what allows us to sort of really enjoy London is moments when we can just sort of take it in. Just one last sort of specific. One of my favorite places in London is a church. It's near Covent Garden, and it's actually a church that's dedicated to actors. And but it's a small church, and it's very old in its design and architecture. But it's a way to escape Covent Garden, which is one of the great public theater spaces. It's not where they put on plays, but it's a marketplace, and there's always sort of people doing weird things in costumes, and drawing attention to crowds and so forth, jugglers and that kind of thing. But you can escape all that in a second by going into this space. And the treasures of London are actually those off the beaten path places. So I don't want you to think that it's going to be, a high-speed roller coaster ride. Every day, every week that I see students in London, I'll say, where have you gone to refocus your mind? And we'll find the yoga centers, and we'll find the places where you can just be still. So I hope I've given a sense of the range of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Nancy. I'll be sure to put the title of that book in our follow-up email. Quiet London,
Yes.
You said?
Quiet London, and I'll send you the information, the publisher and the author as well. It's a photo book. And it's about 150 pages, and so there's directions, and there's all these places where when you need to have a quiet moment inside this tempestuous city, you can find it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, with that, thank you so much for joining us today in this sort of strange, as Nancy said, Orwellian lecture, but at the same time, we really appreciate it, whether you're a colleague, a student, a past student. We love having a chance to talk to you about what your experiences are like or would be like on these programs. So with that, Nancy, thank you so much for presenting today. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And
my pleasure.
We'll be in touch over email. So thank you so much to all of you, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.